Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Makes it much easier to talk here, setting up the bar. Okay, thank you very much for the Adenauer Foundation for hosting me and also us for the conference and Maurice for this good kickoff. What I want to talk about is two things. It's basically how billboards are still active, at least in the German context, and the second thing is how we basically do grassroots and mobilization efforts. But before I'm going to do that, I really want to pin out and point out early that there are two things which still drive why we do offline campaigning. And this is first, and this is what Maurice was talking about, what are the means of communication, what your target group is using. And the second thing is there are certain institutional settings which sometimes limit you on certain campaign modes, on the ways of campaigning. And you have to see that. Institutionalism is a very driving factor for political campaigns deciding where they will place their money. Because ultimately it comes down to the question, where do I want to spend time, resources, and personnel in order to be successful? And I wanted to point that out early. All right, I called my presentation Politics is a Contact Sport. I still believe that. Because in the age of digitalization, we basically find that people are getting much, much more sensitive for getting in touch on a personal matter. So you want to personalize it either online or offline, and that's what we try to do, at least in a German context. All right, but first, do you know how we win elections in Germany? Easy. With Asian campaign professionals from Kassel. So this is basically how we win elections in Germany. So here you see this is 2013, and some dear Asian friends turned out, and so we won it in a landslide. All right, so the Kassel group is coming in a week from now, so I'm looking forward to the election results on the 24th of September. Okay, now billboards. Let me quickly run through some billboards in 2009, 2013, and 2017. Why do I want to do that? Because billboards are still really important in the German context. Guess how much resources go into billboards on a campaign budget? What do you think? How many percent? We do it interactively, okay? Still goes against my time, but I'm going to do it. 3%, 30%. Yeah, depending on a state or on a national race, but in a state race, it almost gets more than 40%. 40% is going into billboards. That's a big resource, So, and that's something where you really have to be careful. And I mean, the question is, does it make an impact? That's a really big question mark. Because if you go into research, you're going to find, all over the place, that it's not really scientifically proven if they even make an impact. But still, we spend a lot of resources in that. So that's at least sometimes mind-boggling in the German context, but still we do. All right, so quickly run through it. And I want to point out, just that you get a little bit of the German context, high popularity and job approval rating of Chancellor Merkel holds true for most, or for all of these elections I talk about. In 2009, there was an economic crisis worldwide, you might remember, and we had a need for stability. In 2013, we were really well off, economical surge. And in 2017, there was a refugee crisis which still is lingering in the head of some people. And in a way, there is a challenge to the Western narrative. And this all had to take into consideration in order to be successful. So what we did basically was, in 2009, we had a message which said, we have the power. We have the power to overcome the financial crisis. This is now in German. We have the power. And obviously, since it's a female German noun, we have the power to solve the crisis, also impersonated, So this is what we did in 2009. And here you see, very personalized. And this is something as a takeaway from billboarding. Billboarding is still working very good if you personalize it or if you put a controversial issue on the billboards. So we decided for personalization, and obviously the Chancellor was at the center of it, for new togetherness, smart out of the crisis, so we really addressed it. And we vote for the Chancellor, and we made even a new German noun out of it that didn't used to be in the dictionary, and that's something which we really put out there in 2009. 2013, again, after the financial crisis, we were very well off. We put up there big billboards. It's basically called like solid finances are important to us because we think about tomorrow. And here you see like who is responsible in the family for financial issues. Obviously, always the woman, obviously always the grandmother. So she's taking care of her grandchild. We talked about good jobs and new ideas. And we talked about every family is different, but every family is important to us. And I mean that you don't get the wrong picture. Not every German man is cooking well, so, but still we put it out there. Anyway, so there you can see it's more like a feel-good campaign because the country was very well off, and we still are. But in 2013, we had a different situation as today. And what we also again put out there was like everyone counts, everything into view. And we put the Chancellor at the very top of the basically campaign. And just that you get an idea, we basically do it in 3 waves. So we have like 3 different kind of waves of billboarding. That's why it's so cost intense. And we, by German rules, we can place billboards 6 weeks out before the election. So that's a very institutionalized setting, and you have to live with that. All right, in 2000, okay, here you see the biggest billboard we did in 2013. You might know the symbol. We call it the Raute. We do a campaign right now with that. It's basically the Chancellor's always standing like that. For the journalist in the room, she's always standing like that because it stretches her back and she's standing very nicely. So as a presenter, you can know that. And here's what we did basically was we got a lot of media coverage because we said Germany's future in very good hands. So, and that's something, that's the train station in Berlin when it was built in 2013. And this is something Maurice was touching on. Sometimes you do offline modes in order to get media coverage. It was covered intensely, and this is the very interesting thing on that. There were even Tumblr things putting up there on these hands, you know. And this is something as you want to achieve as a political campaign. You want to be driving also pop culture. You want to get into like the narrative of the everyday discussion, because sometimes we as politicians, we lose grip of the idea that a normal human being doesn't talk about politics every day. People stand up, they worry about their job, they worry about the education of their children and a lot of other things, but they don't worry so much about these little tiny policy things we debate every day. So what you want to achieve as a political campaign is basically you want to get into this frame, you want to get into this narrative in this debate normal people have. And that's why we try to use billboards for doing so. Now, 2017, different setting, refugee debate, Brexit in Great Britain, still high economic growth. And here you can see the numbers. This is basically when we went out of the 2013 race, significant drop, and it's heading in the right direction. So that's something where we really seriously had to make some concerted effort in order to think about it, how we would frame the election in 2017. And here a quick glance. These are our billboards right now. Good jobs and good pay. Again, family, a big issue, and new issue. It's more security. It's about police force. We strengthen these who take care of us. And that's something where we really try to touch on this refugee debate and a lot of other things where people still look for security. And that's something which we did in 2017. Our message is, for Germany where I live, good and like it. So, and that's something where we really try to address it differently. And here again, the chancellor is at the centerpiece of the campaign again, and smart and decisive, and she has the great picture in mind, and she listens even to the small concerns. And I can tell you, I'm kind of exhausted because I was watching TV debate last night, and it was like 2 o'clock here till 4 o'clock, so kind of, yeah, was a little bit late or early, I don't know. But still, she won it. So I can tell you, I'm quite certain that 24th of September is going to be a nice day for CDU at least. So that's something where I look forward to. All right, that's billboarding. So what I want to talk about in the rest of my presentation is more what I believe is a very crucial thing, which is getting back into the game. And the game is basically winning door-to-door, winning, talking directly to voters. And that's something where I deeply believe this is something, at least in Western democracies, we see that the digital age is raising the bar for a lot of communication means, but still people look for ways of communication directly to the voters. And in the German context, I want to show you some things which we discovered. The first thing is, and this is the international thing, in the US, door-to-door is a big thing. And they do it because they have very good data on that. They just knock on the doors of the people, and we can elaborate that in the debate later, on the people where they know they will turn out for their respected parties. We don't know that in the German context, and also not in the Dutch context, because our data protection laws are very strict. Here's an example from Malaysia. And I traveled the world, experienced it in checking door-to-door campaigning. And if you see, I even have been to Mongolia. They also have door-to-door, but their doors look different. Obviously, some of them live in tents, you know. So that's something where we really see bringing people back in. But also in Great Britain, Labour revolutionized its doorstep game. It's basically 2017. France, the same. And Germany, obviously, too. So, and that's something where we seriously think, okay, we want to reach out to more people in order to talk to them directly. Why is this important? Because, this is a German voting system, because timing matters. And this is a development you have to see. This is vote by mail in the German context. And there you're going to find, last election, almost every fourth voter voted by mail, around 11 million Germans. And we expect this is going to rise this election as well. And here's the interesting fact. The interesting fact is that basically you can vote by mail 5 to 6 weeks out before the election. So, and this is, again, think about institutionalism. You have a stretch of the period from like 6 weeks before the election till election day that you can vote. So in this setting basically means you don't have a narrative as sometimes political marketers think that you can build up and at the end you have your climax, because along the way a lot of people voted already. So therefore every time there can be an impact. And now institutional setting again, in the German context you can put out your billboard 6 weeks before the election. So a lot of people voted already because they vote early, when you haven't even started the conversation. So you have to think about it, how you can reach out to these people in order to have an impact of your political communication. So this was the first thing where we thought about the doorstep game. And the second thing was also timing of late deciders. Now there's a big debate going on in German context. How do you differentiate them? I don't want to go into that, but almost every third voter is a late decider in the German context. Late decider means they decide on who to vote in the last 10 days. Now, think about that. A big chunk of voters vote early, and a very big chunk of voters decide late. These two things together means you have to find ways to reach out to them. And so we came up with the doorstep game in a very systematic manner. And what we did was, we did testing between 2012 and 2016. I did it myself, and what we basically did was, we took comparable voting districts, and in one voting district, we did door-to-door campaigning and another we didn't do it, and then we compared basically this randomized field experiments, what the results were. And we came up with two results which are important. Between 2 to 4% you have a lift in order of when you knock on doors compared to where you don't. And even this is more like a rural area, and this is more like a city area, and even in the city area you could see there's an up of the turnout and there's an up of the CDU vote, and that's something where we thought, well, this is worthwhile using it. So what we did was basically, and here are some other things, personal touch works. So what you're going to find is basically we had a high opening rate, the reaction to the opening were very positive, we had a big increase, and that's something where we came up. So we decided we want to use it in the German context and make a blueprint for victory out of it. So what we did was basically, we said, well, you know what? Let's make six things out of it. First, recruit, convince people. So what we did in the last year, and I traveled Germany quite a bit, we trained and recruited over 12,000 people in our doorstep campaign. So that's something where we really did an intense work. We prepared them, we asked them for action, we stayed in touch with them, and we reported results. We did a whole gamification around it. I'm going to talk in another session about it. But the thing is, and this is really important to know, right now, there are like, I can see the numbers on my cell. Right now, people are out there knocking doors in Germany, and we have reached out already in the last couple of weeks to 450,000 people already, and that's a big number. And so what we try to do is basically, and I'm going to use my last 3 minutes on that, it's basically, we did an analysis of historic voting patterns, and we did some sort of geo-targeting, which is possible in the German context. You can't target on the individual household, but you can target, let's say, where are more positive areas, and Florence Meyer is probably going to talk about it in another session. And that's something where we then did the contact game, and we go there where basically we are strong, and in this area where we are strong, we're turning out our folks. And now I can talk about it theoretically, I can tell you how we do it, but the practical results show that it's positive. And these are the state elections of 2017. And here are just some results. For example, this is the tiniest state, Saarland. But there we knocked on 75,000 doors, and overall we had 217,000 voters there. So we basically could assume, I mean, it's not really scientifically proven, but we could say every third voter has been contacted by us. And this is a big number, you know. And so what we basically did was, we also did it in other state campaigns, and here you can see the turnout increase and the increase of the CDU result. So I would say this is quite an impressive development, and we are really looking forward to that. Here's the leadership model, how we implement them on the national scale. We have 250 teams in the constituencies, so we do it in every constituency where we reach out to people in every voting constituency. We have 17 state coordinators, we have 5 regional coordinators sitting in Berlin, and we have Connect 17, this is how we call the program. We have a campaign manager there who is managing the day-to-day business. And there you can see that everything goes into that. And I traveled quite a bit in order to understand how different countries do that. And this is basically the model the Americans, the Obama and the Republican campaign did that. They also had an extensive door-to-door campaign. And they have a kind of different leadership model, but we could talk about this on the later stage. But what I want to point out is you need a structured effort. If you want to organize your win, you need a structured process. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay, I'm German, so we like our structures to get some prejudice out there. But still, if you want to do politics right, you have to organize for success. And this is what we did. And we never did that before in such an organized manner for federal election. And I'm quite positive that it's going to be proven successful. And there comes a little techie stuff in. We put out there an application to track what we do. Now, German data protection laws forbids us to track the individual household, but we can track street levels and what are the responses to the CDU along the way. And so what we did was basically we tried to have an idea of what's going on the ground level, because sometimes, you know, you can figure out nice things in the headquarters, but if it doesn't turn out at the door of the voter, it doesn't matter. So therefore we try to do a kind of tracking, and this tracking works quite fine, and that's why I can tell you the number, you know, how far we are right now. Now, I switch that. Wrap up. I really presented you about billboards, but more specifically about door-to-door campaigning. Still, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer in talking to the voters directly, but there's always a truth in politics, message over mechanics. I'm talking about mechanics here, but the message and what the voter thinks about what's the right direction for the country matters most. And the interesting thing, and I have been from local races to national to international stuff, what is mind-boggling for me sometimes is that a lot of campaigns don't think about their strategy and message enough. They think about tactics, but they don't think about what is going on in the voter's mind and how to answer that question. Why are you running? It's often not yet addressed in campaigns. And that's something where I just want to point out that offline campaign tools and things like that, they're all important, but still it's still tactics. You have to figure out why it's important to run, and that's why we're going to be ultimately successful, because the people in Germany believe that Angela Merkel is pointing the country in the right direction, and that's why we're going to win. But we reinforce this message by using the right means to reach out to voters. And that's something where I deeply believe we are quite okay with that. And I mean, for some years now, we have talked about declining party membership, but still, things like that empower people to take part in something bigger, to make politics again as a participation game. And that's something which I think as a politician is a very good thing. And let everyone be part of the campaign is something which we also figure out how to use our membership base doing something meaningful during elections. And if you see what's going on in the US, that the Trump campaign or the Republicans put out their field offices 2 years before the presidential race, so in a way, also resetting up like kind of party structures there is really interesting and shows that political campaigns find a way to employ people and offline tools for political purposes even more. Okay, I have one more final note. That's the application form of the Social Democrats, our biggest opponent. That's why we're going to win this election, you know. Thank you very much.